When you pull back, when you stop engaging, when you no longer react the way he expects, it disrupts everything he thought he understood about you. See, most people believe that words have the most power. They think that saying something, proving a point, making their case, that's what leaves an impact. But in reality, silence carries a weight that words never could. Because when you stop explaining, stop justifying, stop giving him access to your emotions, he starts to feel something he never anticipated, uncertainty. And uncertainty is what drives people crazy. He was used to a version of you that was always there, always available, always responding, whether with frustration, love, or even sadness. As long as you reacted, he knew he had a hold over you. But now there's nothing, no texts, no calls, no questions, no trying to fix things, just silence. And that silence starts to work on him in ways he never expected. It forces him to fill in the gaps, to wonder, to assume, to question himself. And the truth is, a man's mind is his biggest battlefield. He can pretend like he doesn't care, he can act like he's unfazed, but deep down, the lack of closure, the mystery of what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what you're doing, it gnaws at him. At first, he might brush it off. He might think, she'll come back, she always does. But then, as more time passes, that confidence starts to fade. He realizes that something has shifted. You're not the same person he once knew, and that's when the regret starts creeping in. He might not admit it, but he starts replaying old conversations in his head. He starts wondering if he miscalculated, if he took you for granted, if he pushed too far. And the most frustrating part for him, he has no control over the situation anymore. He can't predict your next move. He can't manipulate your emotions the way he used to. That silence, it forces him to sit with his own thoughts, his own insecurities, his own regrets. And here's the thing, when someone underestimates your strength, when they expect you to beg, to plead, to keep trying, and instead you give them nothing, that's when they start questioning everything. They start feeling the loss, because you never truly appreciate something until it's gone. And nothing is more haunting than a woman who once gave you everything and then suddenly gives you nothing at all. The moment he realizes you're no longer chasing him, no longer trying to fix things, no longer seeking his validation, something shifts inside him. At first, he might act like he doesn't notice. He might continue with his routine, convinced that you'll eventually reach out, that you'll break first. But as the days go by and there's nothing, no texts, no calls, no desperate attempts to get his attention, doubt starts creeping in. He starts wondering, did she really move on? Did she actually stop caring? And that thought alone is enough to drive him crazy. See, people who take you for granted operate under one dangerous assumption. They believe you'll always be there. They think no matter how they treat you, you'll always find a reason to stay. And because of that, they don't fear losing you. They don't think about what life looks like without you. But the moment you stop fighting for their attention, the moment you step back and focus entirely on yourself, the moment you no longer give them priority in your life, that's when the panic sets in. That's when they start realizing they might have miscalculated. And here's the kicker. He won't admit it. His ego won't let him. He'll act unbothered. He might even try to make it seem like he's the one who's moved on. But inside, he's fighting a war with himself. Because now, he's the one left with questions. Now, he's the one wondering if he made a mistake. Now, he's the one struggling with the idea that maybe, just maybe, you were the one who truly mattered and he let you slip away. And that realization, it's brutal, because men don't handle losing something valuable the way women do. A woman grieves, she heals, she moves on. A man ignores, he distracts, and then one day, it hits him like a train. And when that moment comes, when he realizes that the person he thought would always be there is no longer waiting for him, that's when the regret starts creeping in. That's when he starts questioning everything. But the worst part? By the time he finally understands what he lost, you've already built a life where he's no longer needed. When a man starts to feel like he no longer has control over how you feel about him, it does something to his mind. It's a shift he wasn't prepared for, a reality he never thought he'd have to face. See, as long as he knows you're emotionally invested, as long as he can predict your reactions, as long as he feels like he holds the power to affect you, he's comfortable. He feels secure in knowing that no matter what he does, you'll still care, you'll still be affected, you'll still react. But the moment he realizes that's no longer the case, the moment he senses that his words, his actions, his presence no longer have the same effect on you, that's when it starts to eat at him. And let me tell you, he will do everything in his power to convince himself that he doesn't care. He'll pretend that he's fine, that he's moved on, that your change in behavior doesn't bother him. But inside, he's wrestling with a storm he didn't see coming. Because it's not just about losing you. It's about losing the version of you that used to be so invested in him. The version that used to care, used to react, used to make him feel important. That version of you is gone, and that realization alone is enough to drive him crazy. Now, he's left wondering. He's left questioning, why doesn't she care anymore? Why isn't she affected? Who is she giving that attention to now? And those questions, they don't go away. They linger, they grow, and they start to change the way he sees you. Because now, instead of being the one in control, instead of being the one who gets to decide how things play out, he's the one feeling uncertain. He's the one feeling like he lost something valuable. And the irony of it all? He won't admit it. His pride won't let him. He'll put on a front. He'll act unbothered. He'll even try to convince himself that none of it matters. But deep down, he knows. He knows he underestimated you. He knows he took you for granted. And now, all he's left with is the regret of realizing it too late. When a man realizes he no longer has access to you in the way he once did, it disrupts his entire perception of control. See, he was comfortable when he knew he could reach out and still get a response. When he could show up in your life and know that you would still be emotionally available, that was his safety net. His reassurance that no matter what, you were still there. But when you take that away, when you show him, not through words but through actions, that his presence no longer holds the same weight in your life, it shakes him to his core. He won't admit it, but he will start to notice the absence of your energy. He will feel the space where you once existed, and it will bother him because he had convinced himself that you would always be there, that he could come and go as he pleased, that no matter what, you would always care. But now, the comfort he once had is gone. He looks for you in the places he once found you, and you're not there. He tries to test the waters, only to realize that the connection he once relied on is fading. And this is when the real frustration begins. He starts questioning himself, asking what changed, trying to understand why you no longer respond the way you used to. And that realization that he no longer has the power to affect you the way he once did, it drives him crazy. Because men thrive on feeling in control, on knowing they can still influence you, still occupy space in your mind. When that power's gone, it disrupts their sense of self-worth. Now, here's where things get even more interesting. The moment he senses that he no longer has control over how you feel, that's when he starts making his moves. He might suddenly try to reach out, not because he genuinely wants to reconnect, but because he wants to see if he still holds space in your heart. He may try to trigger a reaction, hoping to prove to himself that he still has an effect on you. But when you stay indifferent, when you remain unshaken, that's when it truly starts to get to him. Because now the script has flipped. He's no longer the one who decides when and how things move forward. He's no longer the one who controls the emotional dynamic. And that realization alone will haunt him more than he'll ever be willing to admit. There's something that shakes a man's confidence to his core when he sees you thriving without him. Not just moving on, not just getting by, but genuinely becoming a better, stronger, more radiant version of yourself. See, he might have thought that losing him would break you. He might have convinced himself that you needed him to be whole, that your world revolved around him. But when he sees that you are not only surviving, but evolving, growing in ways he never expected, it triggers something deep inside him. Because in his mind, he was part of your identity. He believed that his presence, his validation, was essential to your happiness. And when he realizes that he was wrong, that you are even more powerful without him, that's when the doubts creep in. That's when he starts questioning himself. Was he really as important as he thought? Did he actually add value to your life? Or was he just a chapter in your story that you've now outgrown? And this realization, it doesn't just sting, it lingers. Because the truth is, most people, men especially, want to feel irreplaceable. They want to believe that their absence leaves a void that no one else can fill. But when he sees you glowing, leveling up, embracing a new mindset, a new energy, without even looking back, he's forced to face a harsh truth. He didn't break you. He didn't define you. In fact, losing him might have been the very thing that set you free. Now, don't get it twisted. He may not say a word, he may not let it show, but inside it's eating at him. He watches from a distance, maybe through social media, maybe through mutual friends, maybe just in his own thoughts late at night. He sees you stepping into your power, achieving things that maybe even he doubted you could. And instead of feeling validated, he feels small because deep down he knows he underestimated you celestially. All you do is try to make a statement on your own because on the inside you underestimated you. You never underestimate. And that is something he will never fully admit, but it will drive him crazy. There's a deep frustration that sets in when a man realizes he no longer has control over how you feel about him. At one point, he may have been the center of your emotions, your highs and lows, your happiness and pain. He could say something, do something, and it would affect you. He knew he had an impact. But when that power's gone, when you become emotionally independent, when his words no longer shake you, his actions no longer dictate your mood, that's when the real struggle begins for him. Because, see, men thrive on a sense of influence. They want to know that they matter, that their presence is significant. And for a long time, he may have assumed that no matter what happened, he could still reach you. That if he walked away, he could come back. That if he ignored you, you'd react. That if he gave you just a little bit of attention, you'd still crave more. But when he finally realizes that none of that works anymore, that you are untouchable, unbothered, unshaken, his ego takes a hit. And here's the thing, he won't admit it. He won't say, I miss the way I used to affect you. He won't acknowledge that he notices the difference. But inside, it's eating him up. Because now, he's forced to confront the reality that he is not as significant to you as he once believed. And that thought alone is unbearable. You see, most men don't expect to lose their place in your mind. They think time might create distance, but not detachment. They assume there will always be a thread of emotion tying you to them. So when he realizes you have let go, not out of anger, not out of spite, but out of genuine peace, that's when he questions everything. He may try to provoke a reaction just to see if he still matters. He may test the water, send a random message, bring up an old memory, do something just to see if he can stir up something in you. But when you stay calm, when you respond with grace, or better yet, don't respond at all, that's when he truly feels it. The loss of influence, the loss of control. And the hardest part for him to accept, that your world no longer revolves around him, that you have reached a place where his presence or absence doesn't change your state of mind. And that realization, whether he admits it or not, will drive him absolutely crazy. When a man realizes that you no longer seek his validation, it shifts something deep inside him. See, for the longest time, he was used to being the source of your approval, the one whose opinion mattered the most. Whether he gave you compliments or withheld them, whether he praised you or ignored you, he knew that his words carried weight. He knew that a simple acknowledgement from him could brighten your day, and his silence could leave you questioning yourself. But when that power disappears, when he sees that you have reclaimed your sense of worth, it shakes him in a way he never expected. Because let's be honest, many men thrive on the idea that a woman is waiting for their approval. They like to feel needed, like their opinion defines your beauty, your value, your confidence. But the moment you stop looking to him for reassurance, the moment you stand in front of a mirror and decide for yourself that you are enough without needing him to confirm it, that's when the shift happens. At first, he won't understand it. He may assume you're pretending, that you're putting on a front. He may think that deep down, you still want his attention, that you're just playing hard to get. But as time passes and he realizes that you genuinely do not need his validation, that's when the frustration creeps in. Because if he is not the one shaping how you feel about yourself, then who is? If he no longer holds that influence, then where does that leave him? And that's what truly drives him crazy. It's not just that you've moved on. It's that you have elevated yourself beyond his reach, that his presence or absence no longer defines your self-worth, that you can walk into a room and feel radiant without needing his gaze to affirm it, that you can succeed, grow, and thrive without looking back to see if he noticed. You see, the moment you stop seeking his validation, you reclaim your power. And nothing unsettles a man more than realizing he no longer has control over how you see yourself. Because now you are free. Free from his approval, free from his opinions, free from the invisible hold he once had on your self-esteem. And that kind of freedom, that's something he can't ignore. When he sees you genuinely happy without him, it will unsettle him in ways he never imagined. Not the kind of fake happiness people put on for show. Not the forced smiles or social media posts designed to make someone jealous, but real, deep, unshakable happiness. The kind that radiates from within. The kind that doesn't need an audience. See, he may have expected you to struggle. He may have assumed that without him, you'd be lost. That you'd spend your nights thinking about what went wrong, analyzing every little detail, waiting for closure, waiting for him. Because that's what feeds the ego. Knowing that someone is still affected, still lingering in the past, still tethered to a connection that no longer exists. But when he sees that you're not just surviving, but thriving, when he realizes that your world did not fall apart, that you did not break, that you did not allow the end of that relationship to be the end of your joy, it disrupts everything he believed. Because to him, that happiness should have been tied to him. In his mind, he was supposed to be the reason for your best moments, the one who could give you joy or take it away. And yet here you are, glowing in your own light without him, not looking back, not waiting for his attention, not living in the shadow of what used to be. You are laughing more, loving life more, exploring new passions, embracing new opportunities. You have stepped into a version of yourself that is fuller, stronger, and more complete than ever before. And it's not because you had to prove anything, it's simply because you chose to live. That kind of happiness is powerful. It's a kind of happiness that can't be faked, can't be forced, can't be staged for effect. And deep down, he knows it. He knows that something about you has changed. He knows that the woman who once held on to his every word, who once made him the center of her world, is gone. Not bitter, not resentful, just free. And that is what drives him crazy. Because when a man realizes that his absence did not break you, but instead made you stronger, when he sees that you are living, loving, and embracing life without a trace of regret, that's when the questions start creeping into his mind. Did he make a mistake? Did he underestimate you? Did he walk away from something he should have held on to? But here's the truth. None of that matters anymore. Because this isn't about him. It's about you. It's about the peace you found, the joy you've cultivated, the life you've created on your own terms. And that, more than anything, is the most powerful thing of all. There is something deeply unsettling to a man when he realizes he no longer has access to you, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. When you become unavailable, when you withdraw that energy he once took for granted, it forces him into a reality he never considered. That you were never just an option, you were a privilege. See, when you were in his life, he may have assumed you would always be there. That no matter how he treated you, no matter how inconsistent he was, no matter how many times he left you questioning your worth, you would still be available to him in some way. Maybe you always responded to his messages. Maybe you always made time for him, even when he didn't make time for you. Maybe you allowed him to drift in and out of your life, giving him second chances, excusing his behavior, hoping he would eventually realize what he had. But the moment you become unavailable, the moment you remove yourself from that cycle, something shifts. Suddenly, he no longer has access to your kindness, your warmth, your understanding. He no longer has the comfort of knowing that if he reached out, you would be there. And that realization, it shakes him to his core. Because when a man is used to a woman's presence, when he is used to her availability, he assumes it is permanent. He assumes that no matter what happens, he can always find his way back in. But when that door closes, when he sees that you have truly moved on, that you no longer check your phone for his messages, that you no longer wait for his validation, it forces him to confront a truth he never wanted to face. He lost something valuable. He starts to wonder why. He starts to question his own choices. He starts to replay the past, looking for the moment he lost control of the narrative. Because in his mind, he was supposed to be the one making the decisions. He was supposed to be the one who had the power to walk away and return at will. But now, the power has shifted. Now, he is the one left wondering. That's what drives him crazy. The not knowing, the silence, the absence of your energy. Because it's not just about missing you. It's about realizing that you have changed, that you have grown, that you have reached a place where his presence no longer defines your happiness. And that is a kind of power he never expected you to have. So, when you choose to make yourself unavailable, not as a strategy, not as a game, but as a reflection of your self-worth, you send a message louder than words. You were never his to control. And that is what will haunt him the most. There comes a moment when a man realizes that the one thing he never truly appreciated is now completely out of his reach. And that moment, when he understands that he can no longer affect you, no longer influence your emotions, no longer have any hold over you, the moment that shakes him the most. Because deep down, he thought he had time. He thought that no matter what, he could always come back, that you would always be there, waiting, hoping, giving him another chance. But when he sees you thriving without him, when he sees that his absence has not broken you, but has instead made you stronger, more radiant, more at peace, that is when the regret sets in. Not just regret for losing you, but regret for not realizing your worth when he had the chance. Because here's the truth. Most people only appreciate value once it's no longer within their grasp. When something is freely given, it's often taken for granted. But when it's gone, that's when its true worth becomes clear. And the most powerful thing you can ever do is show him, without saying a word, that his presence or absence does not define your happiness. That the life you are building, the confidence you are exuding, the joy you are experiencing is happening with or without him. That's what unsettles him. That's what keeps him up at night. Because he expected sadness. He expected you to crumble. He expected you to struggle without his validation. And instead, what he sees is a woman who is glowing, who is focused, who is elevating in ways he never imagined. He sees someone who has embraced her own worth, someone who has stopped begging for love, someone who no longer looks back. And nothing is more frustrating to a man than realizing he has lost access to something irreplaceable. He may not say it, he may not admit it, but it eats away at him. He starts to question himself. Why didn't he see it before? Why did he let go of something so rare? Why was he blind to what was right in front of him? These questions will linger, and the silence from you will only make them louder. That's why the most powerful response is no response at all. Not bitterness, not revenge, not trying to make him jealous, just moving forward, completely and unapologetically. Because when you no longer seek his attention, when you no longer need him to see your worth, that's when he will finally understand what he lost. And by then, it will be too late.